first thing I'd like to do tonight is welcome everybody to the 6th Annual Sustainability Lecture Series. And thank our sponsors. Tonight's sponsors are Balance Tech, Inc., the University of Montana School of Business, Livesey Freight, Williams Real Estate. How am I doing? The Missoula Independent, excuse me, Rockingham Design. Thank you. And tonight's speaker is Nancy McCourt. Nancy is a native of Montana, Laurel, Montana. Grew up, she says, next to the oil refinery down there. And decided to escape as soon as she could and moved to Missoula. Somehow, in the course of her life, she ended up with scooters. I guess she could tell you how that may have happened. But anyway, she's an avid scooter owner and enthusiast. Has some vintage scooters as well as some new ones. Has Scooterville here in Montana, and when I walked in cold call off the street, introduced myself, and asked her if she'd speak to us tonight, I think last summer. And she was eager to do that right away, so I really appreciate that. So, Nancy, your turn.
Cool. Thanks, Blake. Thanks, everybody, for coming out. What a beautiful day it was today. And so I'm excited to be here because it gave me the excuse to ride my scooter for the first time in 2009. So I'm excited and probably a little bit crazy to be doing that. Not so much because of the temperature, because it was really pretty nice out, but because of the ice on the side streets. So had to pretty much stick to Brooks and Broadway and won't be going down the slant streets on the scooter tonight, I don't think. But thanks for coming out to talk about trends in transportation. I see lots of familiar faces and folks that I've known through various phases of being in Missoula, and lots of us have been in Missoula for quite a while. So you have every right to be looking at me going, now what's she talking about scooters for? Because our paths have crossed in other capacities. My formal training is as a social worker, and I've worked in social work for a couple decades, more than two, and decided through a roundabout chain of events to start running the scooter shop that my husband, who's a teacher at Sentinel High School, Gary Stein, started in his free time, kind of forgetting that he already had a full-time job. And then we had the scooter shop, which was great. And all of this was actually a result of a yard sale that we went to at John Keenan's house in the mid-90s when you guys moved to Washington, D.C. And my husband bought a Vespa PX 200 scooter from John in 1981 for me for our anniversary. So it was our first scooter, and we were really excited about it. And it's still not really running very well. But there's something about a Vespa. For a lot of us out there, Vespas have been around since the mid-40s, just right after World War II, but scooters have actually been around a lot longer. So I'll be kind of integrating my meager knowledge about scooter history into our talk tonight. I agreed to do this because I'm just kind of a center of attention kind of person and like to get up and talk to people and enjoy when you're kind of captive and you have to listen to me, and that's just kind of sick. But that's how I am, so that's why I'm here. I see lots of people who if you think of the word expert, which I don't really, that's kind of a weird word, but if you think of that in terms of transportation, I see lots of people who are listening to me talk about transportation who I consider local experts and regional and national experts on transportation. So that makes me a little nervous, but I'm just going to talk about my perspective and what I've learned about transportation as a result of running a scooter shop for a couple years and my observations about that. And because I'm a social worker, those of you who've maybe worked with some of us social workers understand that we're really hyper analytical people and really like to dissect things and understand them. So I've been doing that in my observations about transportation. So I want to share that and also glean from you, because now that I'm out of the nonprofit world, I'm a capitalist, and I'm hoping that somebody will come and buy a scooter as a result of me coming here tonight, in all honesty. So my knowledge about the technical aspects of transportation is fairly limited, so I hope to make this interactive and glean and have a lot of people sharing and bringing their knowledge forward. And then hopefully you can, use me for whatever information you might want to know about scooters, the scooter industry. I'm starting to get a little bit of understanding about emissions and the impact of scooters in terms of environmental. I got into it because I really like scooters. They're fun. And all I realized as I was writing out this little thing about my scooters is all of my scooters are two-strokes, and they're like the worst environmentally. So I have to say that we never really market and ever have thought of Scooterville as a green business or a sustainable business, but because we deal with combustion engines, and they're not. Hopefully we can carry electric scooters in the future when we find a product that we feel like we can stand behind in our business. And hopefully we can have like Jetson mobiles too someday in my lifetime. But for now we've got scooters, and we're trying to find the best ones that we can carry and still nurture our love for the little combustion engine motor scooter, because combustion engines are one of my guilty pleasures. And so I kind of like watching NASCAR once in a while, and that's just, we all have our little secret guilty pleasures, but we try to do the best we can in terms of sustainability and sharing information. So first I want to hand around just some scooting magazines so you can get some idea, if you have never been exposed to scooters, what I'm talking about. And also I'm handing out the handbook for the rider safety course, and I'll talk about that a little bit too. Let's see. Kind of get back to my notes. I knew I'd be nervous, so I had to write down a few things. I think in terms of transportation, I want to share with you an outline that I learned in social work training. And then kind of maybe ask some questions and get some thoughts about how people feel, different ways to look at transportation. Because if we're going to talk about it and try to make changes, and I want to change your behavior from 4 wheels to 2, and some of you want to talk to me about making sure that we're doing that in a clean way. And then people like to ride bicycles, and looking at a whole spectrum of transportation. Public transportation is a really important part of local transportation. So how can we look at all of those things and get our neighbors and friends to make the kinds of choices that are going to be the best for our community? So this I really like to look at things through these 5 concepts, and then maybe brainstorm some questions or some ideas that will bring out the aspect of transportation. So in meaning, for example, what does transportation mean to you as an individual? And just to start that off, how many people rode bicycles here tonight? Show of hands. Cool, good. Actually, stand up. That would be a little bit easier and demonstrative. So if you rode a bicycle, stand up. Yay. If you drove a car, stand up to get here tonight. No, I want you to say, if you walked, let's see. If you live in this building and you didn't have to. No?
There are people that work here.
What
Bus ridership.
bus, yes, public transportation, and I just said how important that was. Okay, it looks like we've got just about everybody. Oh,
I stood up and sat back down.
okay, gotcha. I rode 3 wheels, and again, I encourage you, if you didn't see it on the flyer, go check out the 3-wheeled scooter that I rode here tonight, because it's really quite an interesting bike, and it'll be coming out in a hybrid later this year, so I'm excited to talk about that as well. Okay, you can sit down or stand up, whatever. If you've been sitting all day, you might even want to stay standing. But so meaning, your mode of transportation has some sense of meaning. It got you here tonight. So maybe it also gets you to work every day, or maybe it takes you to Helena so that you can try to impact legislative decisions over there, so your car gets you out of town. Or maybe your bicycle also means that it's your way of staying healthy and you're competitive and you like to bicycle race, but it's also your form of transportation to work every day. So let's, if we want to think about meaning and the meaning of transportation, then we also maybe want to take it a little farther, and what is the meaning of transportation to our families? If we live with people, or if we're parents of young children, or if we're parents of teenagers, how does it change the meaning of transportation that you use if you have a 9-month-old versus if you have a 16-year-old? Just kind of, or if you are caring for a 74-year-old in your home. How does transportation, what is the meaning for that? Is it like a tool for health care, which it can be for lots of people, as well as a tool for getting around and getting to the place where you make your income? Another concept that I think it's interesting to explore explore transportation is context. Hope that doesn't go through. So if we think about the context of transportation, what if we need to move lots and lots of people? Do we need to move lots of people just within Missoula? Or do we need to move people around a campus? Do we need to move people through mountains or through valleys? Do we need to move people from one city to another city? So what is the context that we want to use transportation in? Most of us really need transportation to make a living. So that's a major aspect and context of transportation for us to be thinking about. So I think about all these things as I try to think about scooters and get people to buy them as well as have fun with them. And the next concept I would want to talk about or have you think about is power. How does transportation convey a sense of power? Either by what you see somebody and what they're using for transportation. What kind of power is used when you engage with your transportation? Do you use a combustion engine or do you use physical power? I just read something recently about a hydrogen-powered scooter. So, what can we use and how can we be creative in terms of power? But then also that whole other kind of use of the word power in terms of who has power over what kinds of transportation options we can choose from. That's a whole thing that I've been learning about in 2 years. Just selling scooters is the kind of scooters that I can't get because they can't be imported into the United States. Or the kinds of scooters I can't sell to people in Canada because they can't take certain scooters across the Canadian border. So that's another aspect of power. Who has the power to determine that you can or cannot ride scooters in a certain part of town or on sidewalks, right? Or where do these sources of power come from, and how do they impact our choices of what we drive? When I started looking at the history of scooters, it was really interesting because they started really being phased out about the same time trains were, and because the automobiles were really being pushed. So we look at, who were the sources of power in those times when those kinds of decisions were being made that actually motivated people away from more efficient and more sustainable methods of transportation. So power, it's always a fun thing to talk about. And let's see, history. that's another key concept in this model that I like to use when I'm reflecting on various things, and tonight we're reflecting on transportation. So we look at what has happened in history and what's our own history. You know, what's in, can I pick on a few people that I know in the audience? What's in Bob's history or Phil's history that makes them passionate about transportation in Missoula? What is in Missoula's history that we could learn from in terms of what's worked with transportation, what hasn't worked? I've seen pictures of Missoula with streetcars. We have train tracks that still run through town. So looking at all these various concepts really helps me just kind of analyze the whole idea of transportation and why I'm doing it. And things get really slow in the store in January, so this is what I do. And so my favorite and final concept that I use when I'm dissecting various things, and again, we're talking about transportation, is possibility. Possibility. I hope this is spelled right. And I have to give credit to Janet Finn and Maxine Jacobson, who were social work professors at the University of Montana, because they developed this outline, these 5 key concepts as a way to look at social work and different aspects of social work. And social work involves personal work on the personal level, like mental health workers. It also involves community work and community change and community organization. Excuse me. And so this is a really nice framework to be able to look at any kind of part of the spectrum of social work. And that's why I think they developed it and introduced it into the curriculum over here at the social work department. So what are the possibilities with transportation? We've got a really great creative community, and I think everybody's really hopeful and optimistic right now because of a change in administration nationally and statewide. I think there's a lot of possibility in terms of politics and in terms of power. So what can we learn as we dissect meaning and context and history with transportation in terms of developing possibility for how we want to move people, how we want to move ourselves, and so forth as we think about transportation. So now I'm talking a lot, and I need to really start hearing from some of you folks out there. And when all else fails, when you're doing public speaking and you want to make sure people come away feeling good, because it's not really what you said, it's how you made them feel, you bring prizes. So I guess, does anybody know what the word Vespa being the kind of the famous name brand of scooter and synonymous with scooter in most cases? John? Wasp. Very good. I'll give you your prize, but can you elaborate and say why the scooter, the Vespa, is called a wasp? Because of the sound, the buzzy original 2-stroke sound. And also it has, and if the magazines are kind of circulating, you'll see the traditional scooter has a big headlight in the front and wide cowls, and we'll talk about some other prizes will be available if you know the 5 rules of scooters. So I might be mentioning a few right now. They have kind of this wide cowling that looks like wasp wings. And so when the first scooter was developed in post-World War II Europe, the Enrico Piaggio, and Piaggio is the company that makes Vespas, said, "Oh, it looks like a wasp," only he said it in Italian. So they named the Vespa, the scooter, the Vespa. So your prize, it's all very subjective what I pick out, is a Scooterville t-shirt. And if you'd like to exchange that for a different color, you can.
But it really didn't give you a chance to ask the question of everybody, though.
Well, you hand shot up, and it's kind of like Jeopardy. If you ring in and you still know it's a risk to ring in early because you might not hear the complete question. But you did ring in and you got the answer correct. So Vespa, the Vespa means wasp. So we'll move on here a little bit. Can anybody maybe talk about some possibility that they're seeing now currently with what's going on in transportation in Missoula?
Can I, since this is interactive, can I push a different button and ask you
Yeah.
a quick question?
Yeah.
As you're talking to people and selling scooters, who's your standard demographic that's responding, and why are they responding to what you're telling them about scooters?
Okay, that's a really good question, and it's evolving really quickly. It just like exploded, the demographic, in the last 12 months. The original demographic that Piaggio has dealers market to, and remember, I'm part of this really huge corporate thing. I'm like really tied into these giant multinational corporations that distribute scooters, much like your local car dealerships are tied into Ford or Honda. There's a lot of stuff that I don't get to control. But our demographic, according to most of the major scooter makers, are middle-aged women like myself. And that has really quickly evolved into more of what in the 80s were referred to as yuppies, or people with median income and above that have some disposable income, who have some awareness of the kinds of choices they make when they make purchases. So they're trying to make purchases that are mindful and conscientious. But when gas prices started going up, I was selling scooters to people who work at the mills, and people who would say the first thing to me would be, I never thought I'd be buying a scooter. And so that was really interesting, because then now I've had the luxury of looking at the history of scooters and looking at, that's really kind of the original climate of the development of scooters, was post-World War II Europe, not a lot of their own petroleum resources, and so they had to depend on on other countries for feeding a combustion engine. They had a lot of historic cities with narrow streets, wanted to preserve the integrity of their communities as they developed transportation. There was somewhat of a recession economically, and also the bombing from World War II kind of gutted a number of the Piaggio factories. And Piaggio has been making transportation since the late 1800s. They were ship builders and train builders, and so they had to figure out what to do with these factories that were gutted. They wanted to start some kind of manufacturing because it would be good for the economy. They had the support of the Italian government. And so they charged some engineers with coming up with some form of transportation that would meet the needs of Europeans with limited income and communities with limited space for expansion for streets. So they didn't really ever have the luxury in most parts of Europe to develop SUVs as an organic way of transportation. There were concerns about preservation. And so that's where scooters have come from, and then they immediately became something of Hollywood, and people with a lot of disposable income in the 50s started using scooters, and then it's evolved more to women, and I don't know why that is, but that's the demographic that the major companies tell me. Matt?
And is that what you see here in Missoula? And I want to follow that up, because I'm sitting here looking at this magazine as you say this, and I see a guy getting a tattoo and these comic book graphics and this sort of hipster stuff.
Right.
And, before, in my history in Missoula, the few people that I knew that had scooters were young, college students, or, sort of budget-conscious folks who saw them as European and kind of hipsterish and cool. So I'm like, middle-aged women? You really?
I know. And that's...
Pretty image.
Yeah, exactly.
The 60s had a whole era of mods and rockers. If you watch Quadrophenia, The Who, it really has a good exhibition of that culture. So scooters became kind of something like the gearheads would do with the old Chevys, and you'd really, mod up your scooter and have it as a show ride, not so much as a practical ride. So there's some of that has evolved. Scooters were also, actually there's a great scooter manufacturer in Nebraska. So scooters were used in farms, kind of like the Honda Trail 90s are used, and there are things called barn finds, and you'll find an old Vespa in a barn in Montana somewhere and restore it, or anywhere in Massachusetts. So scooters have been used in a lot of various ways throughout the time that they've been made. Locally, I would say our biggest demographic has been people who've traveled and ridden them in the Bahamas or Hawaii or in the military, and young families who want a second form of transportation but they don't want two cars. And that's looking at the 6 years that Scooterville's been around, and that the demographic's been really hard for us to pin down, and that's one of my frustrations being attached to these big corporate entities is they don't know what my demographic is, and the economy here is really different than what they're comparing, and what they're saying I should be selling is different than the economies they're measuring it to. Phil?
The questions, a lot of your questions prompted a question from me. With what you just described, would you say that it's roughly equal the amount of equipment you sold for people who just want to have another toy, something to play with, enjoy just recreating as if they were in the Bahamas still, but they're here on the one hand, and on the other is for people who are seriously using it for transportation? Is it more one and more the other?
It's more people using them for practical purposes. And I think that's just because most people in Missoula are not, at least maybe is a demographic that I'm not yet reaching, but most people are pretty practical with their money in Missoula. And that's why college students are not a huge demographic of mine. They're not that practical. They usually spend their money on Saturday and Friday nights, and I know because I was there. So I think, that demographic's something I really yet have to work with and work on and encourage them. But I know when I was in college, I was saving for spring break, and that's where my $3,000 went. And so I think that it's the practical primarily. And then Vespa has this whole other demographic because it's a Vespa. It's like a Mercedes-Benz. It's a steel-bodied scooter, and I'm trying not to do this whole commercially thing tonight because I was tempted to just make this one big commercial for Scooterville. But Vespas have a collectible nature. So in spite of the practicality, and my whole sales spiel is there's lots of great reasons to buy a scooter, and we can talk about those. But if you want the best value, Vespa is the best value because they're a collectible bike, and somebody will always want it. And whereas the others that are newer, coming out now, and have even better gas mileage than Vespa, will never have that established collectability that Vespa has. So that's a whole other demographic, and those are people that want another toy. Or people that are like the buy it once, buy it right kind of purchasers. Not looking for a bargain, but looking for an investment.
Nancy, how much does one cost, and why would a person buy a scooter instead of a motorcycle?
Good, that's a great question, and that leads us to the 5 key rules of scooters. Anybody know what there's 5 things that make a scooter distinct from any other form of transportation. And so hopefully in drawing those things out, I'll help answer that question. Anybody know one of those things that make a scooter distinct from any other form of transportation?
It's the way you sit. You can step through, you don't have to step over.
The step through, and as the scooter books pass around, you'll see that there's no gas tank to straddle on a scooter. It's all open, and there's a floorboard that you put your feet on, so you sit on it more like a chair than straddle it like a bicycle. So the step-through makes it distinct, and there's 5. So you don't get another prize. Sorry. Anybody know a second thing, John? You sold me a
I
Vespa.
would almost say wheel size.
Wheel size. What about the wheel size? They're small. So originally, 8 and 10 inch wheel radius, so really tiny, and that's where some people go, ah! Now they're up to 16. Some models have 16-inch wheel radius, but good tight maneuverability in those small city streets in Rome and Florence and Paris, and easy to park, makes them a lot more compact. So that's 2. Okay, just so you know what you're missing, here's a vintage Vespa magnet. So we've got the step-through and the little wheels. Phil?
When you said 16 inches, do you mean diameter or radius?
Diameter,
Okay.
right? That's around.
Well, that's
Or
diameter.
across, no, diameter. Yeah, not a math major. So, yeah, diameter.
16-inch radius is halfway across, which would make it bigger than a bicycle.
Right, no. Maybe someday, though. 4-wheel drive scooters. 2-wheel, yeah. Okay, so we had 2, right? Anybody else?
Motor size?
Motor size, no, not anymore. The one I rode has a 500cc engine in it. So, even some of the original ones had up to 250cc engines back in the early days.
You might want to mention that there's one parked downstairs right there.
I did ride the 3-wheeler MP3, and it's parked right outside the front door, so you're welcome to check it out and sit on it. I always encourage people to sit on them. Increases sales.
So would the kickstand parking be particularly delineating?
Nope, kickstands can be the same. You can either have the side stand or the kind of the popping over stand. Nope, sorry.
Do they have a cable brake or a disc brake?
Both. It depends on the model, but you're close. Think levers.
Something to do with the handlebars.
Yeah,
Something.
cables.
You could hook your iPod up to the handlebar.
You can now, or you can get a helmet that has the built-in.
Brakes different than on a motorcycle?
Well, that's close enough. They have motorcycles are all these are heart-shaped fun reflectors to keep you safe and for Valentine's Day.
Thank you, ma'am. I needed a balance.
Yeah, good. They'll go great on a bicycle helmet or. So motorcycles are a manual transmission, and you have a clutch pedal and a brake pedal. And scooters are either an automatic transmission or they have a clutch system on the handlebar. So you're really close with the handlebar. Where bicycles have these 2 levers, on a manual scooter, the left lever is actually the clutch, and you twist it into gear, and there's 4-speed clutch systems. So that's the 3rd one.
Essentially, they're automatic. They don't have a stick and a shift.
They do. No, you twist it. Yeah, and especially the older style, you squeeze it.
Because you just let down and you shift with your foot.
No, different. That's more like a motorcycle style, where you shift with your foot. You'll have to come down to the store and I'll show you on Estella. Yeah, they're fun. It's really fun to twist, and the first gear you go up and there's little numbers for 1, 2, 3, 4. So you just know right what gear you're going into. And then you've got a brake here and you've got a foot brake on the platform. So come by the store, intriguing, getting your curiosity piqued. So the clutch system, the step through the small tires, yes?
Gas mileage?
Yes, but that's not what I'm looking for. Yeah, we've got great scooters, and the mileage on our scooters, the 4-strokes, which are cleaner emissions, right up there with any car, even better with the 4-stroke scooters, and also increased mileage. But that's not quite what makes them distinct. I might have to cheat because I'm talking so much I'm going to forget.
You mentioned it.
Yeah.
First, whatever the front half.
Yes, exactly. The cowls, the engine is covered There's a little clue in that answer. The engine is covered with those metal cowls on a traditional scooter, and then it has what's called the leg shield, the part that comes up in the front and protects your legs. So you can see the cowls and the leg shield on your model Vespa.
My son will love that.
So was the last one the engine placement?
The last one is the engine placement. Excellent. And you win a pair of rose-colored glasses to get you through the next
recession?
cloudy
Okay.
months and the recession. Yeah, thanks.
So does that mean you can't burn your leg on the muffler?
You can't burn your leg on the muffler. Exactly. And the engine is right in front of the rear wheel, so essentially you're sitting on the engine. It's right in there. So those are the 4 things that make a scooter different than a motorcycle. A lot of people like the more modern scooters because they're automatic and you don't have to shift in traffic, and that can be hard if you're on a Harley or on a bigger bike. The shifting can be kind of cumbersome and you have to hold the bike up while you're doing that.
Perform on a interstate now if you're going, with 70 mile per hour traffic and all.
They perform great with the right size engine. Then the bikes with the bigger engines now also have bigger wheel radius, so you're probably going to feel a little more secure in terms of the handling of it too. But they're making these 500cc scooters, and they're there because they're lighter weight. That's another advantage with scooters is they're lighter weight, so putting it on the center stand can be a lot easier. It's not as much. You feel like you're in control of the scooter and it's not in control of you. So that's another advantage. I just love anything with 2 wheels. I love bicycles and scooters and motorcycles. And so I just tell when people say what's right for me, try them all and decide what's right for you. So if I might not sell you a scooter because a motorcycle feels better, but then the whole thing is safety, and that's what I want you to be. So you should be comfortable on what you buy, and I don't want to sell you a scooter if it's uncomfortable for you. So that's kind of the answer to that. But the advantage is the gas mileage. My best-selling scooter is the Genuine Buddy, and it's lots of great cute colors, and it'll get 90 to 120 miles per gallon. And it's a clean 4-stroke engine. Very low maintenance, and they're coming out with the Eco Buddy hopefully by the end of 2009, and it will get close to 140 miles per gallon and has lower emissions than the regular Buddy. So scooter companies are really trying to appeal to those of us that have those priorities. However, they have to see that there's a market for scooters. So that's kind of what we need to do is buy scooters so we can show people that, show the manufacturers that there's a real interest.
So what's like the cost difference between, buying the clean 4-stroke versus the 2-stroke?
Negligible. And I've really started to try to phase out carrying the 2-stroke scooters, but they have this nostalgic following, and a lot of people, when you fire up a 2-stroke scooter, they'll say, "Ooh, it smells like fun," because people are reminiscent about the blue smoke, and they're smoky and they stink, and we don't start them in the shop, whereas I'll start a 4-stroke scooter in the store to demo it, but I'll have to take the 2-stroke outside because it just stinks. But $2,500 you can buy a 2-stroke 50cc scooter, and they come restricted to 30 miles an hour, but we can de-restrict it and make it go 40 miles an hour, and you'll probably get 70 to 90 miles per gallon on that bike. The 4-stroke 125's top speed would be 60 miles an hour, so you could go anywhere in Missoula, like Reserve Street. You could even take it to Lolo. I have customers that use that bike to commute. And it gets 90 to 120 miles per gallon. So it's a good, clean option for people that want to be outside when they're transporting themselves. Phil?
So the differences between scooters and motorcycles, that's for me pretty interesting to hear, having ridden motorcycles most of my adult life.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any legal requirements that pertain to motorcycles that don't pertain to scooters?
Nope. And I know you emailed some good questions about that, and I want to be sure and talk about the legal aspects. And I pride myself. I've done a lot of homework on trying to figure out how to be sure I'm telling people the right thing legally and what they're writing. So anything without pedals that has 2 or 3 wheels and a motor is a motorcycle. So legally, all of my scooters, and you'll hear the term moped. So I use the legal distinction. But some people call scooters mopeds. In Europe, they call them, those terms are interchangeable. For me, they're legal words, and they describe 2 legally different vehicles. Scooters don't have pedals. Motorcycles don't have pedals, so scooters are motorcycles by law. So to be legal, you need to have a motorcycle endorsement on your driver's license to ride a scooter in Montana. And I put one of these in everybody's hands too. The motorcycle safety course is really important to take because you're vulnerable out there on a motorcycle or a scooter just like you are on a bicycle, and you're not surrounded by tons of steel like the people in the cars and pickups are. So you have to be careful, and you have to be mindful, and you have to know safety and be predictable and be a good rider. And we really try to promote that, and following local rules, and being mindful that how you ride is going to impact how people see your vehicle, your mode of transportation. So how you ride as a bicyclist impacts how motorists see bicyclists. How I ride as a scooterist or on my moped impacts how people are going to accept scooters and mopeds in Missoula. So we try to really impress that upon people. Mopeds are bicycles with motors that are no greater than 49 cc in size, that cannot go faster than 30 miles an hour, and have pedals for forward propulsion. So I can't just put pedals on the side of a Vespa and call it a moped. The pedals actually have to move the vehicle forward. And so that gets a little sticky because then mopeds are bicycles by state law. So that's where I'm really trying to be a good advocate and make sure my customers are trying to be good, responsible riders, because mopeds have motors, but they're legally bicycles. So do you guys want mopeds in the bike lanes? Probably not. You fought really hard to have good protected spaces for bicyclists, and I'm all over that because I use bike lanes on my bike, and my kid uses bike lanes, and I don't necessarily want mopeds in the bike lanes because they can go 30 miles an hour. But they don't require a driver's license, and they don't require a license plate, and that's a great sales pitch. So then they only go 30 miles an hour. So a lot of people, that's a really good option for them for any number of reasons. They don't have a driver's license, but a moped's going to get them a lot of places, and perhaps for whatever reason, physically or distance-wise, a bicycle isn't going to be practical for them, and public transportation isn't practical for them. So a moped's an option. The emissions are bad because it's a 2-stroke engine. But where do they ride when they're on Reserve Street and they can't keep up with traffic, and they're a motor vehicle, but they're a bicycle. So I've been working with the local police and traffic enforcement, and we kind of just encourage people to be part of motor vehicle traffic when they can be safely, but when they can't be and the traffic starts to go faster than they can keep up with, they should move to the right, always giving bicycles the right of way because they're bike lanes, not moped lanes. And so then hopefully we can all just learn to allow a spectrum of transportation. But those are the kind of the ranges and the legality with mopeds. It gets confusing because legally they're a bicycle. The state, from my understanding, it's okay to ride a bicycle on the sidewalk, but in the city of Missoula, there's an ordinance against riding a bicycle on a sidewalk. But you can park your bicycle on the sidewalk at a bike rack. But you can't park your moped at a bike rack. but it's a bicycle legally. So the important thing is just to kind of make sure you're communicating as you're riding different things with the entities that have the power, so that you're not going to get upset about where you're parking or riding, and ride mindfully, you know, be predictable and mindful, and then chances are nobody's going to get really upset with what you're riding or where you're riding.
So I interrupted you when you turned it over to the transportation experts on the audience.
Yeah.
Which I'd love to hear from. I'm going to pretend that I'm one for a second.
Okay.
And what's interesting for me is what you said is that you've got sort of the do-gooder element a little bit of people who are mindful of the kind of transportation they do that was your main core demographic originally.
Yep.
And then gas hits $4 a gallon, and all of a sudden that's the most overriding thing that people are looking at when they're buying a scooter.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty interesting.
It is interesting, and I kind of stole the little name of this, scooter Nomics, from Piaggio. They've come out with a marketing thing they call Vespa-nomics. Everybody's doing it. Mazda-nomics, Vespa-nomics. We've got, you know, everything's economics right now. But they talk about and they did a study, I think in 2006, and looking for, well, what would motivate Americans to buy scooters? Because their Vespa-nomics program is targeted to reduce, if Americans rode scooters 10% of the time, I've got these statistics and I'll find them and share them, but it would reduce the total emissions nationally significantly. And it would reduce what we pay for petroleum products significantly. So just 10% of the time is what they're trying to shoot for. So it's, let's get you to buy Vespas, but it's also, you know, they're on board with looking at their product as a way to impact the planet positively. So people are primarily, from that survey they found, people are primarily motivated in America to buy scooters to reduce congestion on the streets, which it will. You know, if you take the SUVs out and you have scooters, we're all safer, I maintain. I don't know much about science, but I know that heavier things and faster things are more dangerous than slower, lighter things. And so I think of that with scooters, and if we had more slower, lighter things out there on the city streets and less heavy, faster things, then we'd all be safer, and I'd be safer on my scooter. So that's one thing that would motivate Americans. Gas savings is the other thing that would motivate Americans, and parking, because scooters are a whole lot easier to park, and we're seeing more and more major metropolitan areas take whole sections of their downtown on-street parking and designate it for two wheels, because you can fit 2 or 3 scooters in a parking spot that'll accommodate one SUV.
You asked about transportation changes, and there are two things that I run into. And in my work, I work in the the pedestrian portion of things, and there seems to be a real there are 2 factors that come together, particularly in downtown areas. You have more people using a downtown area, which requires more sidewalk space and more bicycle accommodations, and yet you also have more cars demanding more parking and greater space in that way. And so you have these 2 forces that sort of are pushing one against the other. The other piece of that I see from my perspective living here in a northern climate is that as one who chooses to walk or bicycle, or has to because of whatever abilities or age things you have going on, in the wintertime, the pedestrian or the cyclist is severely compromised. And part of that is, you know, there's nothing you can do about it because it's the weather, but part of it is where we place our priorities in making it safe for people to operate. And so more people are forced into using a vehicle in the wintertime when the air quality is the worst, when the safety conditions are the worst.
Right.
And so there's a maintenance issue that I think when you talk about where is transportation going, I mean, there's some care, there's some attention to the care of the environments that we're using. because like you said, your scooter, it's the first time you've been on one this year, and even at that, you've got to be very careful about where you choose to ride.
Yeah, I did ride my little one because I own it. The one I rode tonight's a demo, so the store owns it. And I rode my little one on the alley. But I'm in the slant streets, and there's ice like this in the alleys back there, and then the ruts. And so there's no pointing fingers. I know that snow clearing is a huge hot button right now. But how we clear snow is going to really increase or change the meaning of transportation for people.
The piece of that is that people feel safer in a large four-wheel drive SUV, and which it further in the winter, in the poor conditions, which further exacerbates that dichotomy.
Right, but what people feel safer, and I don't have an SUV, so who are these, and that's that power thing, and who had the power to tell us that SUVs were safer when faster, heavier isn't? And so how do these messages and meanings get put out there, and then we buy the messages, or we assume that, yeah, everybody thinks that it's good to have an SUV. And
I'll take my little front-wheel drive over four-wheel drive or an SUV anytime, but it's the marketing.
And I'm really glad you brought up the age and ability thing, because that was one of my things to maybe put up on a paper. But what is the meaning of transportation when you can no longer drive because you've lost your vision, or you never had vision, so you've never been able to drive? And how does that change the context of what you can do and where you can work, and what kind of community you're going to choose to live in? So I think I think we have to really, as we're looking at transportation, think about who needs to be mobile in our community, and how is that changing? How is we're aging, our societies are aging, so how are we going to, I don't want to drive an SUV now. I'm pretty sure I don't want to drive one when I'm 80, and I'm pretty sure you don't want me to. So, who's going to get around, and what are the possibilities then when we're starting to look at development of transportation? And how do we impact the powers that somehow are not making snow removal the priority, or street shoveling? How can we work and shift that, and empower people to make things more accessible and accommodating? Go ahead.
I guess my question is one of marketing. I noticed reading these magazines that it's like sex sells. There's lots of boobs and stuff, and all like shirtless people getting tattoos and like all these little sexy things.
Get those
But at the same,
Get over here.
like,
they're still here.
I guess my question is, what is being done to like convince the kids? Like, how do you make a kid look at a SUV and a scooter and have them not think, Escalade, gangster rapper, doing coke off of hookers and stuff? Like, how do you take that from the huge excess waste and make it? Because scooters are very logical for people with brains and who think and are reasonable. It's like no question, but for people with more of a libidinous choice decision-making system, it's like, wow, phallic object.
Not only that, but I mean, just the term scooter, doesn't that kind of make it more kind of diminutive too?
It does. I get that all the time. I'm buying a scooter for my wife. I would never ride one. Well, you know what? They do ride them. They get home and they get on those scooters and ride them. And they do. Yeah. It's something about motors and wheels, and if you like them, you really like them. That's a really good point. And I don't know, because the very fascinating thing to me is scooters are very machismo in Italy. And Italian men are gorgeous and handsome, and they have this whole, the lover reputation of Italian men. And they all ride scooters. They all ride Vespas. And in Paris
What's the Italian
as well.
What's the name?
Vespa.
But
Wasp.
it's Vespa.
Vespa.
Is there any kind of functional name for the vehicle beyond Vespa, because that's the brand name.
Right.
But are they all called Vespas? Every brand is, or every?
No, but a lot of people call them all Vespas. I mean, that's like Vespa, moped, scooter. And scooter, I think, has come forward from the 30s when they were starting to just put motors and play with putting motors on bicycles, and the ones in America that started looked more like a can and a long skateboard with a handlebar, and you'd sit kind of on this can, and so it was more like a motorized skateboard, and they were called scooters, and so then just that step through design and the name stuck. But that's an excellent point of marketing.
So say if you were to choose for America, like I can imagine teenage girls being, or teenage boys even, just as something cool, like very customizable. It reflects your personality. Like, but I've never seen a episode of Hannah Montana with a huge troop of girls like going on a scooter gang chase. Like,
I know. Well, they did have this show called How to Look Good Naked, and they had a scooter, and it was one of the guys from Queer Eye for the Straight Guy, and he was riding a Vespa. But I got on the dealer talk site and I was like, we're trying to market to America, and you're picking this little niche market to put on a scooter, and that's not who's going to buy them. But if you really look at a lot of the styling, you'll see, like we had one I called the Batman scooter because it was really sleek and sporty looking. So the styling of scooters is changing to appeal to the motorcycle guy market.
I think if you could get little kids, not girls and guys or anything macho or wimpy or whatever, just little kids, if you can get little kids into it.
Oh, I do. Whenever families come in, their kids sit on a scooter. I mean, I go, can I put them on the scooter? And yeah, I'm trying to indoctrinate. I am a social worker and analyze all that stuff, and it works great with marketing. But the other thing is getting people on them, because they're just so much fun, and especially the automatics. Anybody can do it if you've just got a little bit of coordination and balance. And so as an example, people ask us to borrow scooters for different things. So, if you have a need at an event, give me a shout. But homecoming, one of the high schools wanted to use scooters to bring the homecoming court out to the middle of the field. And it rocked, because they brought these guys over and to ride the scooters across town to the Big Sky football field. And we had these macho high school guys that were like, oh, I gotta ride this scooter. And by the end of the night, they were buying one because it was so much fun. And so that's get them on the scooter, take them for a test ride. That's the marketing, because they're really fun. And so you get on there, and that's the kind of, I guess, if anything feels green and sustainable or community oriented about selling a combustion engine, is that it's really community oriented. You're outside, and you're a lot more likely to wave to your neighbors and feel the elements and be in touch with what is happening outside, just like when you ride a bicycle, and why you kind of learn to enjoy riding your bicycle in the wind and in the rain, and you gear up for it. So you have the right safety gear and the right equipment, and it's really fun. And then pretty soon you have friends who are riding their bikes with you, or scooter friends that are riding scooters. So there's nothing like getting a group of 20 scooters together and riding down Higgins Avenue, and we've done some group rides, and so that's great for marketing too, because it's a lifestyle, and it becomes something really fun to do. And then the bonus is you're getting 90 miles to the gallon. It costs you $5 to fill up the gas tank, and it'll take you 2 or 3 weeks to have to fill it up again. And it's pretty reasonable, good investment. So that's the marketing. But you got to get people on them is primarily the thing.
Is it a good business? I mean, is it a profitable business?
Oh, it's a small business in Missoula. It's growing. It's growing at a good rate. We've been in business for 6 years. Gas prices are great for business if they're high. and then word of mouth. So we do service them. We've got a great mechanic, and so we're trying to be this scooter shop. We're the first scooter shop in Montana, so trying to establish a scooter culture, and then tap into people who have the old Vespas in their garage, because there are people out there that have been riding scooters for 20, 30 years in Missoula, but there wasn't a scooter shop. So just trying to kind of build that culture. It's really fun. It's a good business, and it's a fun community to have a small business in, because people are really mindful of buying local, and the whole buy local initiative that the SBC is doing is, I really appreciate that, but it's nice to have a community that helps support that too.
Is there a scooter store in Spokane?
Um,
I mean, I'm just kind of, what's the nearest
They
alternative?
there's a scooter store in Kalispell, Great Scoot,
Oh, really?
and there's a scooter store in Great Falls now, and there's somebody else locally selling scooters who I'm not going to name, and let's see. But if you come to the shop, I'd tell you about, give you the right scooter for you is still the bottom line. Yeah, exactly. I've looked at surveys of scooter riders, and we sell the top 3 brands. That there was this question of scooter riders. If you could open your fantasy scooter store and have any 3 brands, what would they be? And that was Piaggio, Genuine, and Kimco, and that's what we sell. So that made me feel really good. We sell what I feel are the best. Just briefly, I don't know how long, I could talk all night, but probably should wrap up here quickly. Just briefly want to talk about the competition from internet scooters and scooters made in China. And it's because I want you to buy from me, obviously, but if you don't buy from me, then do buy from my competition here in town, or from Kalispell or Great Falls, and buy from a dealer, because then you're going to put yourself on this machine. You want it to be reputable. You want to have somebody who'll back you up as a good product. So buy it from a dealer. A lot of scooters out there are made in China, and it's a different kind of economy, and I'm not a professional economist, but it's a command economy. So they produce scooters, and they produce in their factories because they're supposed to produce. It's a little bit different than production and capitalism in the US traditionally is to produce and make money, but to also build a relationship, so that I know if I sell you a scooter and build the relationship and sell this relationship, then I'll probably sell you maybe another scooter someday when you want a newer, more improved scooter, or you'll tell your friends they should buy a scooter from me. Well, the producers in China don't have that kind of an aspect of economy, and so you'll find a lot of scooters coming out that don't run very well, or they're kind of landfill material after a year or two because you can't get parts for them. So parts availability and substandard engine production are things to be aware of in any kind of transportation, but particularly in trendy things, and scooters are very trendy right now. So beware of the $1,000 scooter, and look for some service and support and parts availability with the product that you do buy. Anybody have any other questions? Thanks for bearing with me and sticking out here and listening. John?
I just wanted one comment and then a question about kind of touching back on the SUV versus scooter notion. It has to do with the perception and our values. Is one interesting article I read recently was that someone riding in their SUV or their big pickup truck, crew cab pickup truck, it's a reflection of nobility that harkens back to the day of the lord of the manor on his horse. And riding a scooter, riding a bike is viewed as a virtuous behavior. And we've even heard our vice president recently comment about how that was, although that was good, that's not going to get us where we need to be, kind of denigrating the behavior. And that's a problem, is changing our values and the perception of those things. Mm-hmm. The question is, though, do you keep a registry, or you have a club of people who have purchased that you can call on as sort of an advocacy group? One of the deals I want to ask about is whatever came to the thing about scooters being parked on the sidewalk, which I think would be an appropriate thing to encourage people to use these.
Well, I'm going to do the legal distinction. I think mopeds could be parked on sidewalks, but scooters should be parked on the street because a scooter doesn't have pedals, and I have a scooter and it's huge and it shouldn't be on the sidewalk. So
There's something about the parking commission said that, but it still can only be one vehicle per space.
Yeah,
You can
so
take it if you park double, right?
yeah, trying to move people forward from old frames of thought and how parking should look, and that parking typically exists to governed parking exists to generate revenue for a municipality. So when parking was developed as a revenue generator, then it would make sense to ticket two people using the same space because it's a revenue generator and you're selling parking spaces, and that's cheating. Well, now we need to shift maybe at what the purpose of parking is, and look at it as maybe find different ways to structure how it generates revenue if two people use the same space, or install different types of meters. I don't know, but in terms of moving forward with transportation and meaning and context of parking, then how can we allow people to maybe maximize what's being parked in a certain space, not maximize the amount of money we get from that space? So there are different trends in municipalities to develop two-wheeled parking, they call it, so that a Harley and a scooter can share a parking space and get along just fine. Or perhaps mopeds, because currently mopeds, this motorized bicycle with pedals, can't be parked, there's a local ordinance, they can't be parked at a bike rack. And so I crack up because there's a woman, one of my customers has this great old, like 25-year-old Honda, and it's really a moped, except it doesn't have pedals. It's got these pegs, and it's tiny and baby blue, and it's just the sweetest, perfectly mint condition thing, and it will go top speed 17 miles an hour. And she has to park it in a parking space and feed the meter, and it's the funniest thing to walk by and see this thing. It's like tiny little thing, and it's taken up a huge parking space, and parking's a premium downtown. So I do keep a list, but man, I have a whole new appreciation for the small business owner, because there are all these things I want to do, but I'm kind of the show, and so I have this great employee, Bradley, and he started collecting emails for people. So hopefully trying to get people engaged in advocacy that can have impact on transportation, but mostly I'm just trying to keep my inventory on track and pay my bills. And so we're collecting names. We have scooter clubs, so our motivation is to collect names and contacts to get people out riding together, and then also to inform them about what they can do to influence the powers. Yep, free parking in our parking lot for two-wheeled vehicles. Yeah.
There's a lot of ferment, especially downtown, on parking and how to deal with it. Because Phil left, but there's a small group that's been meeting on parking issues for bikes. And the sidewalks are fairly narrow, and so it stops some of the local businesses, especially cafes and restaurants, from doing table seating on the sidewalk.
Right.
So anyways, one of the experiments that we're looking at right now is identifying a couple of bike corrals that would basically take away one or two parking spots, but then you could put 12 bikes in it. And so the same thing with scooters, where you could put 3 to 4 scooters into the same spot. I know the parking commission and Ed Guest are amenable to looking at that, and especially with the new parking structure that's supposed to go in over by Macy's. The other idea is that this may free up more surface parking for things like this. So now's a good time to raise the issues and get 1 or 2 pilot projects in place and see how it works.
Definitely a good idea, and on my list of things that hopefully I can get to in '09 is
Montana Scooter Association on it,
Yeah. It's funny because it's, speaking of power and laws, when we register a scooter with the state of Montana, when we do the temporary trip permit, when we sell a scooter, there's no category for motorcycle or scooter, so they're roadsters. So just kind of trying to get into the powers that be and into the bureaucracy, the idea of something other than four wheels. It's just really, really ingrained. So it's so
One of our
funny and
mutual
interesting.
goals as bicyclists and scooter advocates is to get Governor Schweitzer on a two-wheel vehicle. I don't care what kind it is, but I don't think he's ever done that. It's my guess. But let's do that. We've got Senator Tester in the Congressional Bike Caucus now, and I still don't think he's even ridden the bike, but I could be wrong. So let's...
Good idea. That's a good goal. We can work together on that, definitely.
Jag will be in the sidecar.
Yeah, we could do that. We could do that. I just want to quickly point out, too, with scooters, everything I brought tonight for my presentation, I put under the seat of the scooter that I rode. So there's storage, there's some practicality there, too. I brought the rolled up paper and the magazines and the prizes. So pretty good bunch of stuff, but it all fit under the seat of the scooter. Just a little plug there, too, for that.
Do you find that there are more liberals or conservatives riding scooters?
I don't know, because trying to be a good business person, capitalist, try to not engage too much, but we're in a pretty liberal bubble here. And even the Republicans in Missoula are pretty liberal for the most part that I've met in my years here. There's a lot of people that rode an old Cushman, which was an old scooter that was built in Nebraska, in the 40s. And a lot of old guys come in and talk to me because they rode a Cushman on the farm, or they rode a Cushman in the military. Cushmans were used in the military in the Korean War. And a lot of military guys ride them when they go off on shore leave. So it's surprising. And again, wheels and motors, it's a combustion engine kind of brotherhood. And so a lot of people who wear camouflage will come in and look at scooters because they're motors and they're intrigued. And have a guy, we sold a moped to a guy down in Darby who's going to use it to go hunting. And had a customer email me a picture. She's a professor on campus, and she emailed a picture from China. She was on sabbatical last semester. It's great. You got to come to the shop just to see this picture. The guy is carrying five count 'em, live sheep on his scooter on his way to market. And she was in the bus, and they were passing this guy, and he's got these canvas kind of saddlebag things that he's rigged up. And when you look at the picture, you start realizing, you see one sheep really obvious, kind of wrapped around him, but then you look and you see these 5 heads, and then she emails, they're all alive. So he was on his way to market with 5 sheep on this little motor scooter. And then pictures, customers bring pictures from all over. In Paris, the scooters are all a whole block. Scooters line the whole block in terms of parking. So just it runs the gamut,
You got to send the NRA a picture of some guy going off to hunt with his rifles on his rack on the back of the scooter.
Exactly. There's a shared practicality among people, regardless of their political stance, I think, especially in Montana. So, yeah. Thanks, everybody, and I want to thank MCT for the room and the SBC for the invitation, and Blake, I appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody. And just wanted to mention in closing that we're going to have our next lecture on March 19th. It's going to be a panel discussion, Mayor's Forum on Sustainability. I believe there's 4 participants in that discussion.
I know 3 for sure. We've
3.
asked a 4th.
So it's here on March 19th, and thanks for coming.
Thank you.